Hi, everybody. Welcome to Binkhorsts and Blockbusters. This is a podcast about Dune. I'm Cait,
And I'm Gerrit.
and this month on Dunuary, we're
Dunuary.
we are reviewing many different films that are sometimes tenuously connected to Dune, but this one is very connected to Dune, for it is Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part One.
Yeah, this is a movie that came out a couple years ago. The sequel is coming out in a month. Um, I'm a fan.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and I think it's a pretty faithful adaptation to the books. I think that it gives us all the good vibes about Arrakis and makes me want to go hang out in the desert. So I'm excited to talk about this one.
Me too. But first, what's on TV?
Yes, so over the last couple weeks, in a mental continuation of the War on Christmas, I have been exploring the history of the Pacific Theater in World War II, and this was mainly started by listening to Dan Carlin's Supernova of the East podcast, which I thoroughly recommend if you are interested in war history at all, or really like the general vibes of how we got here, what was going on. It's got stuff about maneuvers. It's got stuff about like the crazy shit that happened in war and like a lot of like big picture stuff. But The Pacific is a TV show that doesn't give you any of that big picture stuff and really just follows around a group of Marines. And I have a lot of problems with the show, and it's not about the content. The content was great. They did a great job of showing how fucking stupid all of this was and how bad and dumb. Like this is very World War One level of horrific, violent, terrible, stupid shit.
Oh no.
Yeah. So the best way to describe how the Pacific Theater went was they did the invasion of Normandy uh, all the time to every island they went to. And it went about the same level of goodness every single time. And it was terrible and awful. And I don't recommend fighting a war like that at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, it was pretty
The
awful.
the ocean scares me a lot.
Yes, there's the ocean that's the problem. There was also no boats really involved in this TV show. Like they use so the personnel carriers that drop people on the beach, those are actually called Amtraks, and that's a fun fact,
I see. Yes.
like the trains. But
Yes.
anyway, um, so yeah, there's very little boats, and I was really hoping for lots of boats because like the Pacific Theater is about airplanes and boats, but this show is not about that. It's about, people having to stab people in the face with bayonets a lot, and that's just really unpleasant in the jungle. So the complaints that I have about this show are numerous. One of which is that every guy looks like all the other guys, so I had no idea which guy was doing which things from episode to episode.
This is a complaint you have with many a war film.
Yeah, because they're all wearing basically the same uniform. And during the course of one episode, enough stuff would happen to the individual guys that I would be like, okay, that guy's different from that guy. But like from episode to episode, when they like put on a new clean shirt, it just messed everything up. Because they all had the same haircut. They also like the one thing they could have done, which would have completely fixed this problem, was put their names on their uniforms, like would really have been. Like they would have all had names on their uniforms. Like just give everybody a name tag. That would help.
Yeah, I can
Um,
I can see that helping.
Yeah, the other thing that was really annoying was that these were all based on real people and their written accounts, like several of them wrote books afterward and so like it was real and based on really stuff that happened. But I didn't know that at all until like I thought it was totally fictionalized until the very last episode where they like did the like, what happened to everybody after the war. And I was just like, what the heck? Like I wish I would have known that the whole time. Cause like in Band of Brothers, like they are super open about how, like they have the guys come back and speak about, what they went through in these like little vignettes
Right.
that, like as the episode's starting, that were perfect and like grounded all this in history and reality and fact. But the whole time you're watching the Pacific, you're like, thinking that this is all just like kind of like an imaginary recount of like stuff. And so like a lot of the stuff that happens, you're like, why did they show us that? Like, I don't understand why, like, this is a plot. But it's because it was all based on the true stories and they wanted to be true to the stories of these guys. But like, oh my God. Yeah. So that's that review.
Okay. So do you recommend people seek this out?
I think that if you're interested in the Pacific Theater, you should watch it, but just like go into it knowing those like three things and just like try and keep a better track of which character is which character, I guess. And it's also
Okay.
very dark. Like, do not watch this if you are sensitive to literally anything.
I mean, it is a war thing, but
It's a war thing and it's bad. Like there's gruesome shit that happens here.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, well, that's what was on TV. Uh,
Yeah.
I haven't really watched anything. I've been looking for a new thing to watch. Um, I haven't really found it yet.
Well, I mean you can always just watch Dune again.
That is true. So over here at Binkhorsts and Blockbusters, we're celebrating Dunuary, which is a month-long celebration of all things Frank Herbert inspired. Um, we've talked about David Lynch's Dune. We've talked about Lawrence of Arabia, the original Dune. We've talked about Tremors, The Little Makers, and now we're going to talk about the latest truly Dune inspired media, Dune,
Dune Part One.
Part One,
Yeah.
which I don't think it was really marketed as Part One when it came out.
It was not, and I was pretty disappointed with that when I realized that it was Part One.
Well,
Which I,
I
yeah, I think I realized that before I watched it, but like, yeah.
yeah, because this has started to become a bit of a trend in movies recently of having like a two-part story or even three-part story and not like marketing it like that. For example, when me and my friend we went to watch the Into the Spider-Verse, and like there are like at towards the end of the movie, I'm like, we've been here a really long time. How are they going to tie everything up in the next like 5 minutes? And then it's like, oh, psych, there's going to be another 3 hour movie that comes out in a year or two. Um, in a very similar way to that, Dune Part One isn't necessarily a complete story, but it functions very well as the first part to a larger story.
Yeah, and I think that it does like it is full and complete, I think. In a similar way to the Fellowship of the Ring being a very much a, it's a cohesive story with a beginning, middle, and end, a act three, as you will, that kind of an arc, a climax, and an ending. So I think that it works. And if you read Dune, he does divide it very squarely into two parts at this
Yeah,
point that this movie, divides.
but if we never got a part two, this movie would feel very strange.
Garrett,
To,
if we never got a part two, I would riot.
right, right. It be because it's incomplete. It's not the whole thing.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, and I've been asking to remake Dune since I first saw David Lynch's Dune, and if they just left me hanging, it would be very Dune-esque to do that. But
that's
it would
true.
Be very annoying. The
Uh,
fans would riot.
so in the David Lynch Dune video, we talked a lot about every other adaptation of Dune before this one. So I'm not going to rehash all that again. Um, so a little bit about the production on this one. In a very similar way that the failure of Jodorowsky's Dune and uh, Ridley Scott's Dune that gave us Blade Runner. This Dune uh, required a lot of pre-production, a lot of planning, and was a big passion project from Denis Villeneuve. But he wanted to do some other things before he made Dune because he knew this was going to be a big undertaking. So he made Arrival and Blade Runner 2049 before sitting down and dedicating everything he had towards Dune. Um, Denis Villeneuve is I think, French Canadian filmmaker. Those are the only films of his I haven't seen. Otherwise, I've seen all of his films, which are generally pretty good.
Which ones haven't you seen?
He did some films that were in French that I hadn't seen.
Oh,
His
oh,
his
okay.
like first three movies. He then came and did his first English film, Prisoners, which stars Hugh Jackman and Paul Dano and a bunch of other people, which is really good. It's about a family who's trying to find like their abducted children. So
Oh,
it's a very good movie. It's very well acted, a very good suspense thriller. Um, he did Enemy, which is weird. It's okay. I don't think I understood it.
mm,
It had a lot of like dream atmosphere. It felt very much like a David Lynch movie, which is funny.
mm.
He also did Sicario, which is a bit more of a standard like action movie, um, and then Arrival and Blade Runner, which are both fantastic science fiction movies.
Yeah, they are both really good. I enjoyed both thoroughly, especially as a a original Blade Runner, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep fan. That yeah,
I haven't rewatched Arrival. I think I've only seen it the one time. I wonder how it would
mm.
hold up again.
Yeah, I wonder too. We should put that on the list for spring rewatch.
I do think that would be a good one to revisit. Um,
Hmm. And it's also very Dune-esque in like the oh well, I don't want to spoil it, but in part of there is a Dune-like part
yeah,
that
yeah.
is we will talk about sometime in the future.
The one of the interesting things about Dune and part of like Frank Herbert's vision is like there aren't aliens in Dune. It's all people.
Right. Yeah, and that's really interesting too. And you don't even really get the answer of, was there, well, yes, there are aliens on Dune, Garrett.
Well, uh, yeah, there are worms, but I mean like I guess we're going to get into what Garrett defines as sentience, which probably isn't a good thing to do.
Yeah, especially because we could get way into the God Emperor thinking about that.
Yeah. So
But but one thing I guess like there and this is interesting because there's a question even on Arrakis, are the other things that are on Arrakis native to Arrakis, such as the plants and the little mice and stuff like that? Like, are those even native? Like, is the sandworm the only alien life form, or was like the mice and the plants could have been brought by the humans? But
yeah, yeah,
also the worms could have been too. So that, like there's elements there.
yeah. These are a lot of the questions that kind of go unanswered, which is
Hmm.
fine.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's. I imagine if we really dove into Brian Herbert's books, there would probably be answers to these questions, but
Yeah.
I don't really want to do that.
Me neither.
Um,
But the point is that there's no like Star Wars like alien situation.
right, right, right. Um, so this movie was has been in production since 2019. It was delayed quite a bit by the COVID pandemic in like post production, but it was supposed to come out in 2020, and then they released it in 2021 in a dual release. They did it in theaters in October, and then in November they just put it on HBO Max, um, which I think is exactly what you should do.
Yeah,
You,
especially with the pandemic still being as it was. I watched it on Max, so
I watched it on Max, and then I went to hang out with our aunts, and they were like, "Do you want to go see a movie?" And I'm like, "Okay." And we went and saw Dune, and I was like, "Cool."
well, then they were also able to create that draw of, doing it in IMAX
Yeah.
and, like making it such a big deal. And I think that's really great too. Because I do think it would be a hell of a thing to see in IMAX or even on the big screen. But
Yeah, we didn't see it in IMAX, but it was worth it. For Dune Part 2, I've sought out the IMAX theater. So that's what
mm,
I'm gonna do. I I I feel like even the extra couple bucks on the ticket will be worth it.
well, we can write it off on our taxes for the podcast.
Right, right, we can do that. So speaking of money, this movie had a pretty small budget compared to your modern day blockbusters. Thinking about it, like the average superhero movie that Disney, Marvel, or DC is putting out is about $300 million and hopes to recoup most of that. However, that profit's been dwindling. This film was made for $165 million,
Wow.
which is nothing. Like in the grand scheme of things, it
Hmm.
made over $400 million in its release, and that's crazy to think, especially because there was such a small turnaround between putting it on streaming services.
Yeah, I just think that means that we should be getting a Dune 4. So, you know.
So we, I guess we'll talk about this later, but the success of this movie did mean that they would continue and make a Dune Part Two. There was a lot of speculation over how well this movie would do, but it did great. So we got Dune Part Two. Dune Part 3 is supposed to be in the works, and I'll get to that in one of our later slides. Um, but with this budget of $165 million, the production team used it every penny to create the world of Caladan and Gidi Prime and Arrakis. They made tons and tons of real sets and props that just filled the space with so much like energy and mood that bleeds through every scene. That there's a place, it feels real. Um,
Hmm.
they also did a style of filmmaking which is becoming a little bit more popular now, of not having shots that like would only be possible with a computer generated camera. For a lot of the like sweeping shots over the desert, they actually used a helicopter and like cameras in there to get the look and the vibe and the smoothness. um, otherwise that might take you out of it, of having like impossible shots and strange things, especially when you're flying around in these ornithopters, which they actually
Wow.
built a couple.
Wow. So they really went back to basics like we saw that in The Shining when they did the helicopter shots.
Yeah, I mean, they
So
didn't have
and
CGI in The Shining, but yeah, it's it's the same idea.
yeah, but no, like that's such a departure from modern stuff. Like
It
there's no
is.
helicopter shots in Into the Spider-Verse. Wait, that's animated, right?
Yes, that's an
Okay.
animated one.
Well, there's no helicopter shots in that movie. But either that there's no helicopter shots in Doctor Strange either.
Right.
Like we're getting back to practical effects and I mean building spaceships. Like when was the last time the Star Wars guys built a spaceship?
They don't need to anymore because they have the big light stage.
Exactly. Like boring. And like I've complained enough about Star Wars on this podcast for y'all to know that I think that approach is bad.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. even in the shots that they did a lot of CGI work to like make the sand or the spice harvesters or the city of Arakeen, they went out and found actual places and then CGI'd that stuff in on top, so it's not a wholly artificial place. And I
Right.
feel like
Well, and
that works so well.
yeah, and I mean the other thing is that there weren't, a copious amount of, shots of Arakeen or of other, imaginary cities on Arrakis to like they didn't go out of their way to show you things just to show you them
Right.
either. Like it was always to make a point, to show a thing, to, and yeah, I really appreciated all that.
And much like Lawrence of Arabia, a lot of this was filmed in Jordan. They went out there and found some what the cast and crew remarked as like truly alien landscapes.
Hmm.
Um, Certainly, I've never seen anything like this in America, but there are small slivers. Um, Frank Herbert was actually inspired to write a lot of Dune after visiting a dune desert in Oregon, which is the
Hmm.
last place you'd think to find a desert, but there is one out there.
Hey, the only Dune I've ever seen was in Indiana. So yeah,
Yeah, I've heard a
America's a
couple.
weird place.
Yeah, a couple of my friends would go like sand sledding in like the Outer Banks. Like
Yeah.
whatever, sure, sure.
I mean, at least that's near a coast. That kind of makes sense, but I
Yeah.
don't know.
um, yeah, I
Them
want
Indiana beaches. Woo.
I want to reiterate the ornithopters that they built because I did not realize that until I watched a making of documentary that those were real and not all CGI. Because your brain at a certain point, especially now, can't like really tell these sort of things apart. But
Hmm.
when you learn, it becomes all the more incredible that they made these 70 foot long sci-fi helicopter things. For a number of shots, like when Paul and Gurney Alec are hanging out the back of it, they raised the prop up like by a crane. Uh, and I think that's just so cool. That really goes back to a lot of early filmmaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I guess the last thing in terms of production that is pretty neat to understand because this is kind of a big part of filmmaking. Uh, Typically, you use blue screen or green screen to make whatever backgrounds you want. Recently, with the Star Wars and other Disney crap, they've made the big light stage that just has monitors around that have like a rendered background. Um, that sort of thing is important because if you're wearing anything reflective, it's going to be reflecting the blue screen or the green screen. And then, like in The Mandalorian, his helmet reflects everything. So it needs
Hmm.
to be the right light of the location you're at. This is incredibly limiting because it means you have to have either a set or a very flat place to do these scenes. So for Dune, what they did is they just put up giant beige boards that they could then edit the negative, which turns it blue, and then they could do all their effects on top of that, and then just swap it around. So any like reflections, all of the light, it's bouncing off of the same thing the sand is. It's an incredibly simple and easy solution to get around this problem. It's
Hmm.
Yeah, because like some of my favorite parts of Lawrence of Arabia are just like everything that has to do with the desert. And it makes me so happy that like so much of this was actually in the desert and they went out there in all their costumes and just had a good time.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you can see that in the filming, and they didn't, cut any corners with the desert. Like, the desert is as much a character in this movie as it is in Lawrence of Arabia, and that's so important to get Dune right because, like, when you are somebody who loves Dune, you love the desert first and foremost. Like that's the most important part of Dune is this religious experience of the desert, because like that's a lot of what the religion of Dune is about, and Dune is full of religion and like philosophy and stuff like that. So if you don't get the desert right, and this was something David Lynch's Dune didn't do a terrible job about, was getting the desert right, because that's what draws you in. It's what
Hmm.
pulls you to Arrakis. It's what you dream about. It's what you think about when you think about being in this alien place.
Yeah, so I think that transitions us very nicely to talking about all the characters and kind of like how they interact with the world. Um, a big part of Dune, the planet, is the Fremen that live in this hospitable land, and how just like efficient and resilient and reliant these people are on, and how they live in harmony with the desert, despite the fact that uh, it seems like it's always trying to kill them. And then certainly how Paul, Timothy Chalamet's character, begins to adapt to it as well.
Hmm. Yeah, so regarding like casting, I think that this casting of Dune, especially compared to David Lynch, like this is a phenomenal cast. There's no brown face or black face involved.
I mean, there
Like Lawrence of
wasn't in.
Arabia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought you were using David Lynch or something, and I'm like, hold on a minute.
Well, and there are both brown and black people in this film, which is better than David Lynch's Dune.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But there are people doing whiteface. I mean, all the Harkonnens. They're all wearing very white makeup.
Oh. Yeah, I guess.
So I have I believe the people call this a head canon, a theory on why all the Harkonnens are bald, and pale and sickly. I
Uh-huh.
think because of all the industry and pollutants on Gidi Prime, everybody just has cancer. So none of them can grow hair. They're all on like drugs to try to keep them alive. Um, and I think that makes sense from the narrative of um, Gidi Prime that we're aware of in the books.
Yeah, I think that's a fun headcanon to have. I also really liked the um like the resemblance between Ray-Ban and the Baron, who are up in the top left corner of the screen here, where like there is a resemblance there that you know eh, creates that familial bond between them that you might not understand otherwise.
Yeah, that's a good point. Outside of like their costumes and prosthetics and things, this film, much like David Lynch's Dune, goes out of its way to make sure that every faction has a distinct look to them. Um,
Hmm.
all the mentats have the like lip tattoo type thing. The the Atreides have a look to them. All the Fremen are wearing the still suits, and the Harkonnens are all bald or wearing big like armor things, and the Sardaukar are much different than the Harkonnens, which helps on the assault in the palace, unlike in David Lynch's Dune, where they're all wearing the black hazmat suits.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll talk about costumes in a bit, but going back to casting, I mean, I think that Ray-Ban I think that every person is cast like very well in this movie, and I really enjoyed the different takes on these different characters by the different actors.
Yeah, Villeneuve was very particular in who he wanted to play a lot of these characters. He sought out Timothy Chalamet to play Paul Atreides because he was like, I want someone young but has a look inside
Hmm.
and like a appearance to them that like they're very old,
Right.
because Paul is taught by literally everyone that he could, and is a well of knowledge and uh, age far beyond his actual years.
Yeah, but he is a young man, and in the grand scheme of thing, Dune is first and foremost a coming of age story about Paul. And I
Hmm.
think that, that's one of the struggles with David Lynch's Dune, is that Paul doesn't seem like a young person. who's learning things and going through things. And Timothy Chalamet has a vulnerability to him that's so important for the character of Paul. He looks like, he's young and, slightly fragile, and like he does have things to learn. And he played the, arrogance and headstrongness of a young person so well. All of his acting in this movie is just really fantastic. Like he gets whiny at times, but it's not, like eh, that's him showing that he's a youth, and you see him go through this arc and change and realize who he is and what he's becoming in a way that, is so nuanced and important. And I can't think of another actor who could do that with that same range.
Yeah, he does a phenomenal job here. Um, I just looked this up. This will be a fun fact. Um, Kyle MacLachlan in who plays Paul Atreides in David Lynch's Dune, was younger than Timothy Chalamet was when he portrayed Paul in in this one.
Well, I mean, people, were just not as healthy in the 80s.
Yeah. Well, yeah. People, we've said before we've grown up seeing people in their 20s portraying high schoolers. Zendaya is among them. Um, so like yeah, it's a weird perspective, but I hope I
But
didn't
I mean,
undercut what you were saying by this random fact.
no, no, it is a good fact, and I mean it's funny. Like, I mean, yes, it is kind of, but I mean, it's also like showing that, an adult can pull off this coming of age like transition in a
Mhm.
way that and some can't. Like Kyle MacLachlan, that was bad. It was bad.
Right. Yes. Yes, it was. You didn't get the impression there was much growth. However, here with all of like his anger and like fear over his
Hmm.
visions and what he knows is going to come and like all of the responsibility that's put on him by people around him, you see a very rapid change in what he expects out of life.
Yeah. Well, and so moving on a bit from Paul, I really, so one of the things with Jessica that I thought was so good is that they were able to, I mean, and I guess I should have saved this for the costuming and styling, but like, so because I've watched the trailer for Dune 2 so many times, I know what she looks like in Dune 2, and I know what she looks like at the end of Dune 1. She's tired, she looks older, she looks more grizzled from the desert than
Mhm.
she does in those moments on Caladan when she looks so well hydrated and so youthful and young, like this, the beautiful courtesan, that she is. And I think that like having her go through that transition as she moves from being this like concubine because she's not married to the duke, she's his girlfriend, um to this like mother of the prince in the desert, um like they were able to show that range. And I think in the grand scheme of things, like Jessica is at times my least favorite character in Dune, and probably my least favorite, acting wise in this movie. But at the same time, like it blows David Lynch's Dune Jessica out of the water by like 400 degrees.
Yes, because all of these, especially the women actors, have a lot more range and feels a lot less pornographic than David Lynch's did.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Like, oh my God, that David Lynch is doing sets. Anyway, so I really enjoyed the casting of Jessica, and I thought it was great. Chani, I love that they picked someone who, I also love that they, generally cast for the Fremen to be darker skinned and look like they lived in the desert and had a more hardness to them. And I think that, like when I was reading the books, because I read most of the books after I watched this movie, my pictures of like things going forward, so much around Zendaya and her look. And I thought that the acting that she did in this movie was decent. I'm not sure she's that great of actress because I haven't watched a lot of stuff that she's been in. So I'm hoping that she'll be good in the next one.
Yeah, she'll definitely have a much bigger role in the next one. In this one, she was just kind of like uh an
Yeah,
image in Paul's head, you know?
right. Well, and I know that, their relationship is very important to the books and like to like Paul, but I do hope that it's not like overly played up in Dune 2.
I don't know. I yeah, I guess we can get into that when we talk about rampant
Yeah.
speculation.
Yeah. So the other casting that we need to talk about is Layat Kynes. How do you feel about the casting of Layat Kynes?
Fine. I think she does a good job.
So choosing a woman to play Layat, I
Yeah.
just think it's very interesting. It's a very interesting choice.
Well, I don't think so in the books, Liet Kynes is this guy who comes to Arrakis and says to like some Fremen children, like, "Hey, I can terraform your world and make this place green." And the Fremen were initially going to kill them because they were like, "This is an intruder. This guy found our siege. We gotta get rid of him." But they're like, "Oh, you can terraform worlds. We'll do whatever you say." Um, so I don't really think like the gender played into it at all. Like I don't
So,
think that's a part of their character.
well, A, the
Is this
person
the
you're
sort of
describing
discourse
is
you were wanting to get into?
yeah, yeah. I
Okay,
mean, yeah.
okay.
So A, the person you're talking about was Layat Kynes' father.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
Yes.
You're right.
So B, Chani is Layat Kynes' daughter.
Right.
So I just yeah, I just thought that was very interesting.
So I think what we're doing is we're combining characters and like limiting things, which is
Hmm.
something that this movie does well. It cuts out
Yeah.
scenes from the book and like doesn't involve characters until they're going to be needed for part two. Like notably like the Baron's other nephew, Fey Rauda, and uh the God Emperor, or not the God Emperor, but like the Emperor Christopher
Yeah.
Walken, like they're not in here yet because they don't need to
Hmm.
be. In a very similar way, I don't really think we need all of Liet Kynes's like backstory and like that whole family
Right.
thing
Yeah.
yet. Um,
Yeah, yeah, because so I guess Johnny and Paul will probably find out at the same time that Liet is dead. So, like, yeah, I mean that'll be interesting how they handle that because and this is the reason why. Because in Fremen culture, the a woman's position in society is very different from a man's. So having Liet be a woman is very different than a man in that frame and culture. So, I mean, I
okay,
guess
yeah,
we'll see how it goes.
I didn't comprehend that when you asked the question. I thought this was a much more like because there's always this online discourse about like changing like characters like gender and race and that sort of thing,
Hmm.
and I don't really give a shit like
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
it,
I think it was a so I think that it has implications on the, like Duniverse. But I also at the same time think that it was a great position. She does a fantastic job of being that like neutral voice, and like her like prominent thoughts about like the prophecies of Paul and like blah blah blah. Like a fantastic job. I really enjoyed it. I just thinking about the greater picture of the Duniverse and how that progresses and all that. Very interesting to me.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really don't have much to add here.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well,
Um,
and yeah, all the characters are great. I really enjoyed the casting for everybody. I could just talk about like, oh yeah, the casting for the Duke was great. Yeah, he was cool. Like Gurney, cool casting. Like that. Should have had more loot, but maybe we'll get that in the future.
uh,
Or
we
Balisette.
we are. It has been
Fantastic.
confirmed. Him and Hans Zimmer worked on a musical piece that Gurney will have in part two.
Oh, wonderful.
Um, I wanted to give a special mention to Javier Bardem, who plays Stilgar. Uh,
Oh, I didn't realize that was him. Oh,
yes,
wow. Okay.
this is No Country for Old Men's Anton Chigurh.
Ah! Hey, I mean, Freeman. Yeah.
He does
It
get lost in
tracks.
this role. So when he was approached for this role, he was like, "Yeah, I wanna play this." He compared it to being like Viggo Mortensen's Aragon of wanting to play and embody this person. Like apparently he was a fan of Dune and really wanted this part.
Well, I think that he will have a much bigger, or at least I hope, a bigger, presence in the next movie. But
Yeah.
God, the scene of Stilgar from David Lynch's Dune where he gets, beat up by Jessica and he's like, "Oh, I guess you guys can join us now because you're wilding." Ooh. This Stilgar, way better.
Yeah, and I like the scene where they introduce him in the big room with the giant real desk and the nice
Oh yeah, and
weathered
he spits
carpet.
on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they're just like, man, who the hell is this? And that's a good introduction to like how like weird these people's customs are, and also how he looks at Paul and is just like, I know what you're about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it is so important too because like in that scene you learn so much about all of the characters. The Duke and his like, he's not just paying lip service to the idea that they need to, harvest the desert power. Um and you understand, Stilgar and water and you begin to the wheel begins to turn on how important water is to the Fremen and moisture. Like it's not even about water, it's about moisture.
And they do all this without directly coming out and saying how things work. Um,
Hmm.
which is I think such a great thing about this movie is you don't need the scene where somebody explains to you what the movie's going to be about because like that information gets told in a very diegetic way of just like people talking and being like, the emperor is going to strengthen your hand to crush these guys. Like here's why
Right.
they need to do that.
Well, and they also completely avoid the terrible thought voiceover problem that, has plagued Dunes of the past. Um, because I mean that's something that like people say about Dune is that it's a book about like a lot of internal monologue. But I mean, we've gone through so many book to movie situations like Game of Thrones where you have characters having internal monologues and we figured out how to film them. So, I
Yeah,
mean, we're making progress.
yeah. I think that's one of the things that in the 60 years of filmmaking that has gotten to the point where like yeah we know how to communicate these ideas.
Hmm.
And one of the ways we communicate ideas is through a new weapon called sound.
Whoa! Okay, I will say the voice, the way they did the voice in this movie, very, very good. I loved how, they were able to both visually and audioly, I don't even know. Um
Audibly.
audibly show that when you're under control of the voice, you lose complete control of yourself. And it's
Yes.
almost like you lose time, which is a fascinating part to, thing to add into the Dune lore. But
Yeah, because
so the
that
mu
opening scene at the breakfast table where Jessica's like, "Make me pass you this water," and then he says it. There's the audio, and then she comes to, and the water's like further down the table. Is a really
yeah.
great like. it's so simple. It's so simple to show and communicate what that is. Um, and the effect they used for the voice was one of the last like things they had finished for the movie. They were working that down to the
Wow.
wire on getting it right. Um,
Yeah.
at least in
Well,
terms
and they
of the
did.
audio effects.
And especially the way that they when she's doing it when they're in the ornithopter,
Ornithopter.
and yeah, and she is coaching Paul through it. It's something about the pitch, like it's about the pitch, and like that totally makes sense with the way that they play the voice too, like they manipulate the pitch of the sound in order to signify that they're changing it. Another thing that is really cool in this movie that they did was the sign language.
Yeah, the Atreides like battle sign language.
Yeah, I just thought that was such a great like thing to like throw in and you know show. I mean, yeah, because the voice, and yeah,
I
it's
that reminds me of in the books, and this is a scene that's never been adapted, of when Lady Jessica goes in the to the conservatory and finds like a message from an older Benny Gesserit that's been left on like leaves. And it comes down to like showing that there's like a higher level of intrigue, like almost like a spy thriller going on here
mhm,
of like secret codes and languages and stuff that I think does a whole lot for world building.
yeah, yeah, and so it's not enough that each of the houses has their own languages for the planets that they're on, but they also have these secret languages and these secret codes, and there's all of these different disparate groups like the Mentats and the Bene Gesserit, and like the battle commanders, that they all have different languages that they use to communicate these different things secretly. So there's just so much going on. And I mean the Fremen have their own things. Um so it's very, yeah, very cool.
So do you want to talk about Hans
Yeah.
Zimmer?
Yeah, so the music is done by Hans Zimmer, and interesting. So like when I read that, I was like, oh, Hans Zimmer, like he's done a lot of like very popular movies. Like he did Gladiator and Pirates of the Caribbean, which if you listen to them both or you watch them both in a relatively short time span, you realize that it's the exact same song, and you're like, really? I've been cheated. Pirates is such a cool song. I didn't realize it was in Gladiator, which came first. But the only Academy Awards that he have won were for Dune and The Lion King.
And he did not win the Lion King when they remade the Lion King, and he came back and remade the music. I just want to say that.
What do you mean?
So they did a CGI Lion King where they made all the lions and animals look realistic, and he came and redid all the Lion King music, and he did not
Ew.
win the award.
Well, I mean that just sounds terrible, and I'm glad I didn't know about it before now. And
You
I'm gonna
wait,
forget
wait,
it soon.
hold on. Are you not aware that like every classically animated Disney movie is being remade as live action?
Garrett, I don't believe in musicals or the Disney Channel, so
I'm
no.
I'm pretty sure Javier Bardem plays the king of Atlantis in the Little Mermaid reboot.
Oh God. Okay.
I'm
I'm
pretty sure
gonna.
that's real.
But anyway, I'm gonna ignore that and now explain to you that The Lion King is actually about Dune, because it's a coming of age story where a young prince goes off into the desert and meets some weirdos, and they eat grubs.
And they teach him about Hakuna Matata.
Yeah. I mean the ways of the desert.
So you might actually be onto something because I mean The Lion King is just Hamlet. And when we get down to it, like uh Dune is kind of like Hamlet.
Well, God, I don't remember Hamlet enough. I thought Hamlet killed his father.
No, no. So Hamlet's you're thinking of
Macbeth?
yeah, you're thinking of Macbeth. So in Hamlet, Hamlet's uncle kills Hamlet's dad, who's like the king, and then Hamlet's
Uh-huh.
uncle becomes the king and marries his
Uh-huh.
mom. And
Ew.
Hamlet like sees ghosts and stuff and figures all this out. And I think he kills himself or something.
Okay.
But you know, they're
There are a lot of
similar.
similarities, definitely between the Lion King and that, but also Dune and Hamlet. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it's just, family houses rivaling for power. The Harkonnens and the Atreides are kind of cousins at a certain point. Like
Hmm.
that's how they're described in the books.
Yeah.
Um, but this has nothing to do with sound. Uh, the the sound in this movie is fantastic. Get the best set of speakers or whatever you can get to listen to it on. They do a lot to have really awesome musical pieces. Um, there's a video you can watch of, I think, one of the songs they did for Dune as like a performance, and it really seems like every one of the performers is making love to their instruments. It's very weird, it's very strange, but very cool, very Dune.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds like a Sea Georgie. So okay.
Uh, on scene, we also have an image of one of the more iconic things of Dune because it gets memed a lot. And it is the voice that opens up the movie of the Sardaukar throat singing.
Yeah. Which I think so one of the things that they do really well with the music in Dune is so and they do the same thing with the costumes is that each of the different houses kind of has their own music to
Yes.
go with them. So the Sardaukar have this like crazy religious feeling, throat singing, it's very industrial. It's very like just off-putting and strange, which I think is very on brand for the Sardaukar. The Atreides they use
Bagpipes.
bagpipes when they're going into battle, and that's a vibe. And it's cool and it's interesting and it's fun and it does remind you. So in kind of like the opposite way of including an acoustic version of All Along the Watchtower in your space movie. Um, it does remind you that these are humans who came from Earth.
Yes.
So like there's ancestral connections to these, very common instruments. So like in Caladan, you have, the balisette, you have the now I've forgotten the name of the bagpipes,
Yeah.
and those kinds of things. Whereas on Gidi Prime, it's much more like creepy and weird and industrial and strange. And on Arrakis, it's a lot more like tribal. It's got a lot more percussion instruments and singing and things like that.
Yeah. Um, I love it. So
Yeah.
many of the scenes that involve music are incredibly well stylized. I really like the Sardaukar scene where they're like there have been sacrifices and they're getting blood
Hmm.
wiped on their foreheads, and even the scene where bagpipes are playing and Gurney Alec is like charging with the rest of his men into battle. Like it's so badass.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so badass. And with the swords,
Oh, I love the swords. So
swords are so cool.
a bit more of production. They got a like sword master guy, and he worked with Paul and Gurney and Jason Momoa, Duncan Idaho to like work and perfect and choreograph all the fight scenes, and they used like real fighting styles and things, and it's so cool.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed all of that.
Yeah, the scene where Duncan Idaho is just facing off of like 10 Sardaukar in a hallway and just like ravishes all of them is so badass.
Yeah, I mean, the fighting is just really incredible. And I wish there had been more. Like that would have been the only thing to make it better is if we had, more fighting in Dune.
this is the problem with Dune, is even though it is about a bunch of wars, we never really know all the movements of the people. Like that doesn't matter. What matters are the victors. But because of that, I'm almost hesitant to say we'll see a lot of like big battles, despite the fact that we've seen battles in like visions and things. That might be a departure from the books.
Well, and I actually think that not seeing battles is not a bad thing because like battles are very hard to depict on screen in a way that makes any sense, that
Right.
is easy to follow, that the battle in part one is so good because it's all chaos. Like
Yeah.
they were able to show a few scenes where like you had the battle on the steps when the Sardaukar came down and the Atreides were fighting them, or you had the Atreides guys trying to get to the ships and then fighting some guys on the ground. So like being able to show those like small moments of chaos, I think that works really well. But having large land battles between the Harkonnens and the Fremen, I mean, it's just going to be very hard to depict that in a way that's easy to understand.
Right.
Whereas, showing Paul's visions, which are broken and unlike they're, you know, they could be very choreographed or just very like quick and like they could be a lot of things without showing us what it was really happening,
Right.
so that we can't have a moment where you have me yelling at the television that they were doing a pike formation incorrectly.
Yeah, I don't know why they would have moved down those steps. You want the high ground.
Well, it was because no, the Sardaukar were on the top of the steps because they came in from the ceiling
Yeah,
or
yeah,
from the
but they didn't
sky.
know they were coming in from behind them until they were charging down the steps to meet the Harkonnens.
Yeah.
Also, like I hesitate to say that like the slow blade pierces the shield like a spear is the best thing to use, or a pike. I think you would need a lot of control. It would also be easier to deflect because of how big it is.
A pike.
Yeah,
I mean, we could get halberds in here.
that would be more badass. I do
Yeah,
want to say the
giant
halberd is the
halberds.
coolest of the pole arms.
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely think some halberds in here would be, and then I mean you get the really long kind, and they're ceremonial weapons, so you can be holding them, and have like cool looking tassels on them,
Yeah, like
so
the
that'd be
uh like
cool.
the like the Swiss Guard.
Yeah, I mean the Atreides could have just been the Swiss Guard. There's real pros and cons here, but either way, halberds would have been very useful. Um,
um the last thing I want to mention about sound. Um, so they realized pretty early on that in order to give like a really cohesive like style to the production, is they would have to like work on how everything sounded while they were making the movie, which isn't too uncommon, but typically that's something that's left for people at the end, much like CGI. Um,
mm,
so during production, they would get sounds from like the desert that they were filming in. And one day they went out and they just put a bunch of microphones in the sand,
mm-hmm.
just like buried them, got sound of people walking around. And what they realize after a while is that the dunes, because it's billions of particles of sand moving, they groan. They have,
Oh,
yeah, which
wow.
is crazy. So they recorded a lot of that. They recorded a lot of wind. Um, they did a lot to make sure that everything had presence, including the like flapping of the ornithopters. That was another thing they spent a long time doing. Uh, it's the little details of getting
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
soundscape right, because sound is so crucial for movies. If this didn't have the score, if this didn't have the feel and the ferocity of wind, it wouldn't be Dune.
Right. Yeah. That is absolutely true. and making that effort to go the extra mile to do all these things and to come in at a relatively low budget, you know really, really good stuff.
Now we can talk about something that we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Not that we didn't want to talk about other things, but we mentioned this before, is costume design.
Yeah, and I loved the costume design in this film. I think that they did a great job of, creating very different costumes for the different factions. The Harkonnens, the Atreides, the Bene Gesserit. They all have their separate looks to them, like the guild or the Herald of the Emperor and all the guild guys. Like the guild guy costumes were incredible,
You
so
did not
cool.
include you did not include a picture of them here, and they are my favorite costume
I
because
did not, and because I
it's
forgot
like
about them.
I'll do it in post, but it's like a reverse scuba helmet, and inside it is full of spice, which is
Yeah,
awesome. It is so
yeah,
cool.
so cool. Like all of the people like that show up during that thing, and that's one of the first scenes in the movie too.
Yeah.
Like so cool. So I think that my favorite is the Benny Gesserit hat things.
All the
Um,
veils and stuff.
Yeah, the veil hat situation way better than David Lynch's Dune, but does borrow a little bit from the styling.
Yeah, it does.
Um, yeah, for the Reverend Mother. 'Cause it's just a strange and always in black. But I also really love how they depicted Jessica, where, when she's on Caladan, she looks, very much like a posh princess, living in this beautiful land. And then when her Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother comes to visit, she wears this beautiful black gown with this like black hood that covers her head, and it's just such a great look because it shows her in almost a childlike position because this is somebody that she looked up to, as her superior, like blah blah blah. Very few places that she goes in her life will she not be the person on top.
Right.
So this is her being in this position of a minority person and almost like a child again. So the way that she looks in that gown. But then when she arrives on Arrakis in that beautiful orange beige situation with all of the beautiful veils
And it
and
flows
jewels.
in the wind.
Yes, the flowing in the wind, like just so beautiful, like a true queen landing on this planet, like just amazing stuff.
I didn't mention this in the casting thing because I forgot. But the woman who plays the Reverend Mother back for Jodorowsky's Dune, she was in the running for playing Lady Jessica. So we've come full circle.
Yeah, and that's such a fun fact to like, yeah, to come to for the people from Jodorowsky's Dune to still like loosely be involved in a Dune is, really amazing.
And she does a really great job. I do love the Gom Jabbar scene.
Oh yeah, it really is fantastic. Like they really captured, the idea of the Gom Jabbar and all of that, and you know
I mean,
the box and
even in the scene where she's talking to the Baron and Hyder is she has control over the situation.
hmm oh
She
yeah,
she she has the ultimate power here. That's why she's
yeah,
the
she is on
Emperor's
top.
right hand man.
Yep.
Um, in the behind the scenes thing, I saw that they had made over 200 different costumes, which is a ton. A lot of hard work went in to this by Jacqueline West and Bob Morgan.
hmm
Uh, Also, I want to talk a little bit about the Baron because he remains one of my favorite characters. So Stellan Skarsgård, every day they would shoot his scenes. He spent 7 hours getting put into this fat suit. Um, he wears underneath all the prosthetics a like cooling suit that is essentially a still suit. He's wearing a real one. Um,
Wow.
yeah, because like if it takes that long to get in it, you're gonna be in that. that you need to be cool. It's the same thing that like Gertie or like Gritty or like the Philly Fanatic or Brutus the Buckeye, like people in those costumes wear like cooling things because they'll die and overheat on the sports ball fields. Um,
Yeah, you're talking about mascots. Yes, mascots and furries have to wear cooling
yes,
suits beneath their costumes, indeed.
yes. So Stellan Skarsgård, the furry who plays Baron Harkonnen, they did tons of like castings of his body to get the like different parts
Oh,
to
that's
fit so
disgusting.
well,
Ew.
and like spent hours and hours painting on him to like get the veins and like all the kind
Ew.
of lumps and stuff all right, and to have that like really weird hunchback he has of like his shoulders like creeping up. Um, and they had to develop a couple different like prosthetics and things to let him do stuff. They had to make it resistant enough to whatever the black goo he's seen bathing in is, and
Mm-hmm.
in the scenes where he's like floating on the dinner table to like have wires so he's strung up there, and you would think that like this would be an absolutely terrible and horrible experience, but he talks nothing but highly about it. And then a couple of the behind the scenes things, like he seems like he's having fun and he does a little dance while he's floating on the table. Um,
Oh,
he really goes hard in this role, and like Brendan Fraser won an award for acting for The Whale, and him wearing that big fat suit, and his performance was really good. I just want to give Stellan some recognition here as being the ultimate fat guy.
yeah, bring in the floating fat man.
Yeah, it's gonna be sad to see him go. Uh,
Well, spoiler?
I mean, eventually everybody dies.
I mean, that is true even in Dune. So the other thing that I need to talk about is the very Nazi-esque Atreides costumes.
Okay, we're talking about it. We're
We
talking
have
about
to
it.
talk about it. We have to because I mean, so what I was reading about the the online, they didn't mention any of this. They didn't mention any influences on the design, only that they wanted clean lines and they wanted them to be closable with magnets rather than buttons or zippers, and I was just like, okay. But I mean, these costumes for the Atreides are so Nazi-esque, and they're also, in the same way that the New Order in Star Wars and the Empire are.
Yeah,
They are those lines with the dark military costumes, and even though they didn't say this, I mean it to me it just is that visual reminder that the Atreides, despite all appearances of them being the good and bringing peace and harmony to Arrakis, they're really just bringing another version of fascism to this planet. And I think that the costumes say that in a way that is not said out loud in another way in this movie, and I love that.
right. In a very similar way, the eagle motif, like that has,
Yes, the Eagles.
yeah,
Yes.
that has always been associated, at the very least with Germany for a very long time. But then
Oh yeah.
that took a different expression when the Nazis were doing their thing. But even in the scene that like we're showing here, that looks exactly the same as the scene in Star Wars where like
Mhm.
Emperor Palpatine comes on the Star Destroyer and all the stormtroopers are lined up. Like the imagery is there.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and
it-
and also the like the way that there's like that unified, like when Leto accepts the like mission, there's like a unified yell of House Atreides. And
yes,
it's like, yeah, like yes, we're on these people's side as part of the movie, but ooh, do they have some things about them that are a little questionable.
yeah, and then that's completely contrasted with both the small legions of Harkonnens that just like hang out in small teams, and then the even smaller groups of Fremen who all have like distinct like wraps and headwear and like personality and like trinkets and stuff to them that no one in House Atreides is going to have.
Hmm. That's
It gives
true.
them more humanity. It makes them feel a lot more like the rebels that they are. And I mean like Star Wars rebels, not like
Yeah.
rebels, because they're I'm well I'm they
Yeah, I mean the Fremen are literally rebels,
right,
yes.
but it's their house.
Yeah, but the people who live on Tatooine, it's their house.
Yeah, 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 you know what I'm trying to say.
No, I mean, I not anymore. I've forgotten where you were going. Sorry.
I just mean in their individuality, they're seen as more of like the heroes, the freedom fighters, and then the House Atreides is very deliberately seen as like this big militaristic force. Even
Oh
the
yeah.
Sardaukar have like a bit more individuality because each one of them has like a different amount of like uh red blood that's on them, and as the thing goes on, I think they like mark how many kills they have with tallies. Like it's uh it's interesting. It's definitely something that visually you see and your brain makes connections, but like they don't have to come out and say it for you to understand.
Yeah. Well, then I think that this is so. I mean, so this is a Dune spoiler. That and please do not listen to me if you want anything spoiled. Um, the Paul is not necessarily the good guy in this story.
No.
So, and this is one of the first and only reminders in this. I mean, the scene where Paul freaks out because he sees the future of him being the bad guy. Like, there's that, and then there's these uniforms. Those are the only real things that show you that these are not necessarily the good guys you think that they are. And I really like that subtlety.
Yeah, it's the little details that have a big impact.
Hmm.
Are we ready to move on and talk about the main event?
Yeah, I think it's time.
It came from the ground. It is worms.
Yes, they yearn for the sand.
These worms are interesting. I
Hmm.
feel like they're a mix of like a whale and like a worm. The very long teeth give that like whale filter
Yeah,
feeder appearance, which makes sense about the ecology of the sandworm as we know it.
right. Yeah, and these worms are the first worms that we really see in any of the Dune-esque universes that you can look at them and understand where the crest tooth comes from. So
Yes,
those are the knives that they use. They're like ceremonial knives that they are teeth from the worm. And I didn't think about this when looking at other worms and gone like, wonder where their teeth come from. Because these ones are so obvious about their teeth.
yeah,
And it's very cool.
yeah. I feel like they could have easily worked backwards. Of like, well, we have these knives, but where did the teeth come from? Or
Yeah,
where?
like what
Yeah,
do the
like where?
teeth look like? Yeah.
Because like if we were looking at tremors, you could just as easily go like the tremors had like little nubs that help them move
Hmm.
through the sand, and you could be like, okay, you can make a knife out of that. So you could have had like these spiky things that like go through the desert. And since we haven't seen the critical scene of well, we did see in a promotional thing of them riding worms, like having how they're made up of like the plates and stuff that hasn't been communicated yet, in at least in the first film. So
Hmm.
we'll get some nice close-ups, get to see more texture, because we've seen them just like really far away and intimidating and like otherworldly. It'll be nice to get right up intimate with the worms.
Yeah, because I mean that's half of why we watch Dune.
Yeah, it's the worms.
It's the worms. We watch it for the worms in the desert. I mean, that's the important stuff.
And there there are a number of worms in this movie, and you can tell because they have a much different scale to them. Because like
Yeah,
the first worm you see is the one that eats the spice harvester, and that one is huge compared to this little maker that's gonna eat Paul and Lady Jessica.
yeah. There's a huge variety of the size of worm, as there is on Arrakis. Like that's one of the things that they talk about is the different sizes of worms go different distances before they get tired. So you have to, pick a big worm when you're, traveling long distances. And, I mean, it's like picking an Amtrak train, I guess. So
This
yeah, I
one
mean,
does not have the buffet car
right. You need to get the one for the buffet card if you're going to Boston.
and the sleeper
Um,
cab.
mm-hmm. Yeah, you can get in the one that takes the cars too, the car train.
Yeah, the Acela.
Yeah. I like the Acellas. They're nice. They are freezing though. Um,
Nothing could prepare me for how cold the Amtrak trains were, but
right.
that's
Well,
not
which is
Dune.
it's really the opposite of the dune because that's one of the things is that these worms put off a lot of heat too. So you have to be careful because they're hot. Um, almost like dragon-esque in a way.
Yeah, they're a bit like dragons. They definitely have the like destructive tendency.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of the things that gets mentioned in this is why they don't use shields on like the crawlers or people while you're in the desert, and
Mm-hmm.
the shields attract the worm, and it
They
will
do.
eat you. Um, which leads to like the whole like battlefield of Dune is different than anywhere else in the Imperium, because if you're on the desert floor, you can't have a shield or else the worm will eat you, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't want that to happen.
Right, yeah. So and that requires that the Fremen learn different ways of fighting, um, than everyone else in the Imperium.
Yeah, because they have I think they're called Mauler pistols, which are like little slingshots that that they use to fight against other Fremen, because like and I assume the Harkonnens, because like you can use that, whereas in the Imperium, the only other I think like projectile based weapon we have is like a las gun, and if you shoot that at a shield, you and the person behind the shield explode in I think a nuclear explosion.
Yeah, they've said that it was similar to a nuclear explosion, so it's really frowned upon, and yeah,
Yeah, because even in the far distant future, nukes are the worst things that you can do to somebody.
that's true. Yeah, things don't change. Yeah.
I've moved on to the rampant speculation slide.
Yeah, so we've thought a lot about what's going to happen next. And so definitely if you don't want any rampant speculation or you don't want any spoilers based on the books, then please skip ahead to the time for what did we learn slide or even farther. You might have to because we're probably going to talk about the books in that one too.
And
So,
and
yeah,
this isn't
sorry.
going to be like the rampant speculation you probably see elsewhere online, where it is people analyzing every frame of a trailer. I think that's very boring. Um, but but go on, Kate. What do you think is going to happen?
I think that it's going to be good. I'm pretty excited. I think that, Paul is going to become the best Freeman there ever was and train a legion of death commandos to take down the Harkonnens and the Emperor.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great first and foremost. I'll let the viewers in on something. When we were originally conceiving of Dune Tober, um, before the strikes happened to the extent where the movie was pushed back because of it, uh, if we didn't get Dune, I was working on a spec parody of all sorts of things that could happen in the Dune Part Two movie that we probably wouldn't get. But I'm assuming in this one we're going to have a number of flashbacks to kind of explain some more people, um, and kind of like a flash forward, as there is a pretty decent time jump in the book. Um, I think we might get a couple scenes of them fighting in the arenas. We already know we're going to see that to introduce Fade, but
Hmm.
Gurney Alec and the Beast Raban have a history of like they fought in the slave pits, and that's where Gurney was from. So maybe we'll get like that scene, which I think could be pretty cool.
That would be cool. I doubt we're going to see that. One thing that would be really interesting to see is if we were able to see some of Paul's, so when he looks into the past, like the Atreides are related to Agamemnon and, other Greek, figures of, battle commanders and stuff. I think it would be really interesting if he had like a conversation with them in some way, like
Too
that would be
weird.
cool.
I
No.
I think that would be too weird for this series.
Gerrit, I think it would be too weird, but that's the weird that I want, and I
Th-
am ready for the God Emperor, so just give it to me.
This is true. I do, however, think we're going to get Aaliyah in all of their glory. I think if David Lynch was able to attempt it and do it, then Denis Villeneuve will have no problem explaining the abomination.
I do hope we get the Abomination. I'm going to be very disappointed if we get no Abomination because like she's so pivotal to everything that
Especially once we get part three, Dune Messiah.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You can't like
And we do know that Countess Frenrang has been cast, so we know there's going to be that subplot between them and Fade Raltha and trying to like get more to the heart of whatever the hell the Kwisatz Haderach is. Um, so I think we're definitely going to have really concrete explanations on what all of this is and how it works.
yeah. Yeah, and I think some more internal Benny Gesserit discussions probably involving Count Fenring's wife and like stuff in that direction. Yeah, yeah, that'll be interesting. Maybe some revelations about certain bloodlines. That would be interesting. Maybe
Oh,
coming
I
from
think
Jessica.
that'll have to be part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I want more Stilgard too. Like, give us some good Stilgard doing
I've
Stilgardy stuff.
I've heard Stilgar's wife has been cast.
Oh,
Um, and I believe they're on the poster or one of the posters. So I
okay.
think they're going to have a much bigger role because they do have a big role in
Yeah.
Messiah and Children of Dune.
Well, is it Hera or is that Jameis's wife?
Uh, I think it's Hera. Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Yeah,
been a minute.
because I mean, I also think it would be interesting too to see like do you think that they're going to open with like giving of Jameis's water and like all of that?
I think we're going to open with either somebody explaining to the Emperor Christopher Walken what's going on, or um, introducing Fade. I think that's what we're going to start with.
Yeah, I remember too that you have to, the beginning of this part of Dune is very much the Harkonnens and the Emperor and everything thinking that everything is fine and dandy and wonderful.
Right.
Because they don't know what's happening in the desert because they refuse to
That's true.
acknowledge that these desert people are important.
That's true. I guess that's a good point because unlike David Lynch's Dune, there's no reason for anybody to like know anything or worry yet. Um, so then we'll probably see similar to what we saw in the beginning of this movie is like the Fremen attacking some Harkonnens and stuff. You know, kind of the status quo. Um,
Hmm.
I do have to say the water of life scene is going to be crucial,
It
and
will be. Yeah.
we know it's going to be a PG-13, and they said there's going to be some light nudity, but I really doubt we're going to get the full extent of the siege orgy. I don't think we're getting
Yeah,
that.
I don't think we're getting a siege orgy. But if you are looking for a siege orgy and you need another Dunuary film to watch, that you were like, that's really a Dune film, but it didn't make the list because we didn't have enough weeks in Dunuary. You gotta watch The Matrix 2, where they have the siege orgy. Or is it 3? 2
I
or
know
3? Whatever. Watch the entirety of the Matrix trilogy, you'll see a siege orgy.
I was so confused where this line of was going. I didn't know where the bit was going. Uh I didn't I wasn't
Listen,
prepared for the Matrix.
I have talked about for years how The Matrix is another story about Dune. So, so when we get Dune 3, we're going to have Dunuary again or Dunetober, depending on what time of year it comes out, and we will talk about The Matrix and The Lion King in relation to Dune.
Okay.
It is. It's about a guy finding out he's the one and being able to
Yeah.
see the world through binary.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
tell me
And
how that's not about Dune.
yeah. Yeah.
There's
You're
also squid guys that go through tunnels.
okay. Yeah, we'll watch the Matrix. Um
And there's a sea orgy, so
Okay, okay, yeah. The brother sister podcast. We'll watch a Siege orgy. Okay, great.
You're
And
welcome.
that's one reason why I think we'll never get the Siege orgy is
Yeah,
because
yeah, and this is why we're never getting a sea
yeah.
orgy because it's a sea orgy, and like there's certain things that make people uncomfortable. Watching Caligula in groups makes people uncomfortable. Okay, we found that out the hard way.
Well, like I saw a thing about like and this is something that like I know people in the real world that are adverse to like any nudity or like sex scenes in film and television. And I don't get that. I think it can serve an artistic and, narrative plot point. I don't really care. I'm not repulsed by it in that regard. But this film, I feel like doesn't really need it. Because I don't think we're going to get the first Duke, Leto. I don't think we're gonna get him to get Leto too. I think they'll just ignore that if they do Dune Messiah have because like Chani's giving birth in Dune Messiah for like the whole damn book. I think we'll just save all that for them.
Yeah, I don't see Paul and Chani having a child in Dune Part Two. I
No.
think that is such a weird part of Dune that doesn't get picked up in Dune Two, and it was like a weird thought that was there, but it didn't quite work out in the plot for the like long term Dune universe. So yeah, I agree. I don't think we're gonna see any children of Paul in this one.
No. They'll do that in Dune Part Three if they do it at all. Um, because
I think they have to. Like,
well, if they want to set it up to like somebody else take over for Children of Dune, or to get to God Emperor, like yeah, you'd have to have him have the kids in Dune Messiah, which is going to be part three. Um, if not, I don't know what you would do. I don't really know what you would have Chani doing that wouldn't be like against what they were doing in the book. Um, and because like half the plot in that is like Princess Irulan trying to kill Chani, so she doesn't have these children. Um, which will be interesting how they set up Princess Irulan in part two because they are going to be a huge part in part three.
yeah, yeah. And Princess Caroline is a very important like character in the Dune universe. And I like Florence Pugh a lot as an actress, and
Oh
I
yeah,
I hope that she can impart something interesting onto this character. I know in the books, like one of the things that Jessica, who's not she's not the best Benny Gesserit there ever was either.
right,
She thinks she like is always putting down Irulan for being like a bad Benny Gesserit. But I think that part of that is that Irulan could never be a Benny Gesserit because of who she is.
right, right.
So
Yeah,
Yeah.
She wouldn't be trusted.
Right. Yeah. And she can't, be the, mystical being. And certainly could never be a Reverend Mother or, any of that. Like, yeah.
I
Yeah.
do have to say, I think the like chainmail thing she's been wearing in the promotional images looks stupid as hell, but
It
uh
does. It really does.
okay. I'm glad we're on the
And
same page there. I thought you were gonna get angry at me.
no, I agree. It looks pretty dumb. And I think that part of it is that it really has no basis in any kind of like, fashion in history because like so many of the fashions in the costumes in this, they have visual cues which, harken to something. Like the Atreides, looking a little fascist.
Hmm.
And that thing just has no connection to anything like at all. So it's just it fails in that way. Like it's just not, yeah. I don't know what they were going for. But like, and I mean usually I will, praise a hat
Oh
that
yeah.
looks really weird.
Yeah.
Like so yeah, disappointing. Disappointing hat. I
So
also just can't see Christopher Walken and Christopher Walken Land being into that hat either.
yeah, I feel
And
like
like,
yeah.
yeah, and part of the whole thing with everyone around the Emperor is they do everything that they can to bend over backwards for him. Um, so
You look stupid. You look like a Game of Thrones extra. Get out of my imperial court.
yeah, like
Um,
ugh.
what's so I now we're gonna ask the big question. What is the likelihood we're going to see a fast forward from Paul's perspective in seeing and understanding the golden path and the worm?
Oh,
Because like if they did that, my rocks would be off. I would be to the moon. That would be the best thing that they've ever done in a movie ever.
I hope so. I hope we can get some Golden Path. That sounds fantastic.
Because there's an excellent scene in the book when he first arrives to like one of the Seaches, and I think it's after he does like a shitload of spice, and he can see in the air and like the world around him, like how every change, every interaction that he could take right now could like spawn different timelines and things. And I think
Hmm.
you could do that really awesome. That could be an awesome acid trip type thing. And then to see the one where you get the worm would be
Yeah.
phenomenal. And
Yes,
then
it would.
the other that is the truth of what happens to him would be just as great.
Yeah, yeah. I think well, I think that doing anything like that is absolutely paramount because to me, like the whole point of Dune and the whole point of Prescience is that you see the paths ahead of you and you see the future and you understand how each of the different futures has failed and how it fails someone important to you and how
Mm-hmm.
it's bad and how you have to move away from it. So Paul is always trying to move toward this point where he can't see the future anymore because that means that he's gotten rid of all those terrible, futures. And I think that yeah, yeah. So like we need that in some way. And yes, to be able to see what happens to him in Messiah and to be able to see what happens to the God Emperor and to see, maybe a Duncan, Idaho, to see, you know, the future as see Arrakis covered in trees.
Yeah, at the very least, you need that because that starts to happen in Messiah.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just to like be able to see what he can do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because that's something that he freaks out about in this movie is he's just like I see a
The jihad.
crusade. Yeah, he sees the jihad, fighting in his father's name, and it's like, nah, dude, that's your name. Like they're rallying behind you. Um,
Yeah.
it's they've done a little bit of it. I want them to go further. I want them to go as far with it as they will need to make part three
Yeah.
as effective as it needs to be.
Well, and the other thing that I'm really hoping to see is to see the change between the Paul that sees the jihad and runs away from it and the Paul who sees the jihad and runs toward it.
Right.
Because that is a important, character arc for our young Paul.
Is and this is Dune Messiah. Is Agola in that one? I don't remember
Um,
if they bring Duncan back.
yes, actually, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when they start because it's that's how they get him. That's part of the plot is to use the
Right.
Gola
Yes.
to,
Yes.
to get his confidence, you know.
Right. Yeah, it's been a while since I've listened to the audiobook on that one.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we're gonna have to do some setup. We'll probably have in. I am predicting we're gonna have some post-credit scenes in this, and one of them
Ugh,
might
I
be.
hate those.
I hate them too, but one of them should probably be a Bene Twi'leks coming and scooping up part of Duncan Idaho's brain. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
doesn't Piter come back in the first Dune?
I don't think so. I think he's dead.
Okay, I couldn't remember because I know the Baron like he makes a comment at some point about getting another one of those in the book. Um, but then that just might not happen because that would be a good introduction to the Bene Twi'leks.
Yeah, yeah, if they were to recreate a Piter.
Yeah.
Ew.
The thing about part three is that they're going to have to introduce them. They're going to have to introduce the guild navigators. Um, like I feel like one of those two is going to take a bigger role in part two, just so that way they can like set the stage.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, and you have the shifters and all of that too. The face dancers. There we go.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't
which are
think that'll
very
be in this
important.
one. That's a bit too weird.
Yeah. No, yeah, I would say that if there's going to be any, it would be the guild navigators.
Yeah, because they have a stake because they're going to notice spice production is down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that if there's any, scenes where, there's any like discontent with the Emperor and the Harkonnens, it will be about spice production. And
Christopher
that,
Walken is definitely going to, in like his low, whispery voice, he's definitely going to say the spice must flow.
oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We need that.
If I could do a better Christopher Walken impersonation, with any level of confidence, I would do all the lines that I think he would say. But he's definitely going to do that because he has a delivery that is
Mm-hmm.
befitting the Emperor.
Absolutely, yeah.
Talk about amazing casting. God damn.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like if this is the last movie that Christopher Walken ever does, I'll be fine. I'll be happy. I'll be fulfilled. He's
I'll
done
be
some great works.
I'll be fucking distraught.
He's old, Garrett.
4,000 years. Get him the spice.
I mean, I don't think spice is the answer, Garrett.
Spice is always the answer.
Yeah,
See,
so what did
that
we
was a
learn?
transition.
Yeah, yeah, it was. So I think that this movie was a fantastic adaptation of a great book, and I think they did a great job. I think that Frank would have been really impressed by this, and I think he would have been happy that, it took so long because I don't think if they would have made this movie, even 5, 6 years ago, it could have um been as close to this as it is.
Right. So in the future of Dune stuff, we're gonna get a Dune Part 3 if it if this one does well, which I assume it will. They've already started working on a script. Um, but Denis Villeneuve is going to work on a couple different projects before we get that, which sucks, but they're probably going to be great. Um, he's working on a Cleopatra movie.
Cool.
We like
Cool.
we like her.
Yeah.
A a movie based on the sci-fi short story Rendezvous with Rama, which is about uh, people like investigating like a derelict spacecraft that wanders in, which sounds awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a possible third Sicario film is in the works. It's unclear at this point how attached he is to that project. He didn't like direct the second Sicario movie, so who knows? But if we get a Dune Part 3, it'll be several more years. But hey, that's okay. Like at this point, we take what we can get.
Yeah, and I think that another thing that's kind of important there with the timelines and stuff is that, Dune Part 3 should take place far enough into the future that we don't have to worry about like the cast getting too old
Yeah,
and
yeah,
aging out. Like that'll all work itself out and
yeah.
that'll be fine. So no need to panic there.
Um, Also, in late 2024, which is this year, we should see on HBO Max a limited series that focuses on the origins of the Bene Gesserit.
Now, I don't have any good hopes for this. I really don't even think it's going to happen, but I mean, have they filmed it?
Well, prepare for your hopes to get even lower. The series has been in development since 2019, so around the time the movie started. Um, in that time, it's gone through two different showrunners. We're on the third. It faced criticism early on for its lack of female creatives behind it, being that it's all about the Bene Gesserit, who are all women. Uh,
Yeah, but I mean,
I'm,
it's a
I'm
weird
wincing.
sex cult, so I'm not surprised that like men would want to be involved.
Yeah.
And women maybe less so, you know? Like,
That's a good point. The
yeah.
it paused production during the COVID-19 pandemic and then re-began production in 2022. It was halted after the second showrunner left. And then over that break, several people were recast. It resumed production in July of 23, even though that was during the strikes, but it's being developed under the British Union rules, so they didn't really care about all that. Um, we'll see. HBO Max has shelved a number of things that it has made to completion and cancels projects on a whim. So I have no idea how far this is going to go.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't necessarily think that there's enough like content for them to really even be able to riff like a Origins of the Bene Gesserit situation on. And I'm not sure I want to either. Like it's just a weird concept for me, and that's coming from somebody who is fully on board with worshiping the God Emperor. So, take that as you will.
So on the like production side, Brian Herbert and then somebody else from the Herbert family are like working on it. And I know Brian's written a ton of books that take place in the Dune world, so it's possible they're like pulling on other material. But
Yeah, but those things are like universally disliked by Dune people.
yes, this is true. This is why most people stop reading at book four, even though five and six are written by Frank. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, I've tried to read five. It's just very hard to read, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And I mean, one of which is that, the God Emperor is the God Emperor, and
yeah,
I love the God Emperor, and that's really what it matters. So,
yeah, it's a fitting end to the story, and like we've said before, like Dune is such a very rich like world and lore. Even the first book is. You don't need to read all the books um to get a sense of like the grandeur and what's going on. You can, but like the first one is more than enough of a sci-fi setting. It's very much like in Star Trek and Star Wars with every edition that they make, it just seems like it's getting things either more complicated or like details and things you don't really care about. I imagine Dune has the same glup shido phenomenon that Star Wars does.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that either next week or the week after when we talk about Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah, and the massive influence that Dune had on science fiction.
Yeah, and then the influences that Star Wars carried out over the film landscape of sci-fi stuff. Um, so I guess that's what we learned. When the masses get a hold of Dune and make it really profitable, people go, "Let's pump out as much of this shit as we can."
Yeah, let's get some action figures going.
There are actually like Timothy Chalamet and Zendaya action figures for this movie. You can go and get. There's a Dune Lego, which I talked about last episode during Tremors. Um, yeah, there's a lot of tie-in bullshit to buy and spend money on. There's a video game. There's a board game that has actually had some like critical acclaim. Um,
Oh God, Dune Imperium.
yeah,
Oh my God, Garrett, I have never ever wanted to flip a table more than playing Dune Imperium.
okay. Tell me more.
It's just one of those very, very complicated games that there's like way too many things to remember that's going on. It very much like in the Dunuverse.
Okay, yeah.
And so there's too much to take care to like keep track of, and like counting, and like the way that the combat worked was just nuts. I will say that it did a very good job of giving each of the factions of Dune their own personalities and their own like attributes, and connected those to the book. You get to play on a map of Arrakis. That's cool. But the game mechanics were fucking god awful. And I mean, like, there are people who love this game. I am
Yeah.
not one of them. It is
Okay.
not for me. It is not for me in any way whatsoever.
Well, I was going to suggest we play it, but not anymore.
No, I mean, no, no. Like,
Okay.
oh God. Like, I mean, it's more complex than like a Gloomhaven situation.
Ooh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and way less fun. Like, there's no fun to it, Like, and very much there isn't a lot of fun in Dune at all. Like, Dune is not a fun situation. It's beautiful, it's inspiring, it's empowering, it's interesting. It's not fun.
Okay, that's true. That's true.
Yeah,
Dune is not
yeah,
fun.
Dune is not fun. But being the God Emperor is.
So where do we rank this in our movie scale?
It's really good.
It it has held up to every rewatch I've done of it, and I've seen it
Yeah.
many times.
I
Home,
I
theater,
yeah.
it's good. Watch with your friends, watch alone. Um,
Yeah, I was surprised at how much I still liked it upon the second review. I was also very surprised at how faithful it is to the books, in so many ways. Not just in like the things that happen, but in the vibes, in the mood, in the spiritual, connection to the book is there in a way that, not a lot of adaptations of books can get.
yeah, I mean, I'm looking at some of the movies we have, and if it's based on a book, it's well, there are a couple, but like The Shining isn't faithful at all, and it's better because of it, you know?
Hmm. Well, and Silence of the Lambs, I mean, that's a book, but I mean, that's different. Um,
All Quiet on the
yeah.
Western Front is several books, but they take, different liberties. Um, by itself, I think this movie really holds up. Like you don't need to know everything about Dune to get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Um, I think wherever this goes, Dune Part Two is also going to go. Um, I'm
Well,
really
and
leaning and saying this is an A tier film.
Yeah, and my real hesitation with an S tier is that it's a part one of a movie.
Yes.
Like we can't put a single movie in the S tier that's just half of a movie.
Yeah.
And I don't, while I do think that it works on its own, I don't think that it's as full and thick and complete as like the Fellowship of the Ring.
Right. Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, like the Fellowship of the Ring can stand on its own and be an S tier movie on its own.
Which it is 100%.
Yeah, but I just don't think that this quite can do it on its own. Together, they might together be an S tier movie, and we can think about that, in a few weeks. But yeah, I guess for now, A tier.
Okay. A tier for pending reevaluation.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see. But we also have to consider the phenomenon of being at the movies, and it does make you think that movies are better than they are.
Because they're bigger and louder.
Hmm. And you are shoveling in the cocaine spice that is popcorn and Sour Patch Kids.
I'm not going to buy popcorn at the movie theater. It costs as much as my degree did.
Yeah, but I mean it's like 3.5 hours. Like you're gonna have low blood sugar by the end.
But here's the good thing. Here's the good thing, dear viewers. This movie is coming out in March, which is fine coat weather here in the northern hemisphere. So if you would like, you can sneak in as many goodies as you want from the outside, and no one will know. No one will give a shit.
Yeah, but then I'll smell the popcorn.
Okay, that's true. I mean, popcorn is really good.
And
Um,
at the movie theater, like it's really good at the movie theater. And I only go to the movies like once a year. So
Okay.
like,
Well,
you
if
know.
you, I'm not telling people not to splurge on popcorn, but I'm telling you, it's on markup. It's incredible. They know you want it. It's in demand.
I know.
The
I
the
know.
Harkonnens control the popcorn. They're bleeding
Oh
us
god.
dry.
Uh I'll tell the Emperor and show him, and we have to, stage a Fremen uprising to get the popcorn prices down.
There's a rumor in one of the later books that like somewhere on Arrakis there's like a giant tomb that has mountains and mountains of spice in it, and I'm just imagining instead it is popcorn.
Yeah, yeah.
That
Yeah,
is
the Emperor's spice reserves. Yeah.
that is what AMC and Cinemark and Regal are doing to us. They're just hoarding giant vats of popcorn all across the Midwest.
Yeah. Oh dear. Okay.
Well, I want to thank everybody for listening to this much longer episode about Dune and Dune stuff and stuff that's not Dune and sound.
Yeah, and stuff that is definitely not Dune, but we're gonna talk about it like it is Dune, and I'm sorry because everything's about Dune, and that's just the way we roll.
Yes, so in many ways, this outro is also about Dune, because it'll end. And Cait, you can say Zendaya's line that it's only the beginning.
It's only the beginning, which by the way is like the dumbest part of that movie. Like
So
it's really.
stupid.
Like they
So
really could
stupid.
have like not done that. She could have just looked at him longingly or something. Like we could have had literally anything happen instead of that. And honestly, that's the reason why this isn't an S tier movie. Like we can't put that line from a
Yeah,
movie in an S tier. Like
yeah.
there is no
That's
line that
so
is as
cringe.
comparably cringe in any of the other S tier movies. So, yeah. Okay. Bye everyone.